Alrighty guys, now sometimes people ask me what this little pole is over on the right side of the boat. This is the Fort Sumter forward range light. Back further in the harbor on a much taller pole there is the Fort Sumter rear range light. And the way these range lights are used is that anytime a ship is trying to come in through our jetty system, it will try to line up those range lights so it looks like that one light is on top of the other. And when they see one light on top of the other, that indicates to them that they're in the center of the channel. Every time the channel makes a turn, there is a new set of range lights to guide these ships through. So you will see different sets of range lights blinking on and off as we navigate around the harbor today. Now off to our right, and this is going to be almost impossible to see right now because we're at high tide, but there are two semi-submerged black rock walls about a mile off to our right. The rock wall on the right is about 3 miles long, the rock wall on the left is about 4 miles long, and then there is a gap in the center for ships to come in and out of our harbor, which is where you see all those ships out there on the horizon. These are the Charleston jetties. Construction on the jetties began in 1898. It was completed by about 1901. It has made the harbor a lot more of a calmer place to navigate around, but it has also changed our current and erosion patterns here drastically. And you're going to get a pretty decent example of that here in a few seconds because we are going to cross what's known as a convergence zone. And this is where two currents meet. So we're going to see a little foamy line of water right here, and then the water is going to look like it's a muddier color on the other side of this. And once again, this is what's known as a convergence zone, and this is where two river currents meet right here, and this is being caused by the Charleston jetties. Now about 3 miles off to our right, that is where the Confederate submarine Hunley sank the USS Housatonic. This was the first time that a submarine was ever successfully used in warfare to sink another vessel. The Hunley was an 8-man sub. It had no mechanical means of power, so that means 7 out of the 8 guys in the sub were just turning a gigantic hand crank to spin the propeller, and then the 8th guy was steering the sub. So on the night of February 17th of 1864, they went about 3 miles off to our right, planted an explosive device on the hull of the Housatonic, set that device off, and sank that vessel. But apparently the blast wave from doing that also did some heavy damage to the Hunley because no one ever really saw or heard from the Hunley again for almost 131 years. And it wasn't until famed author Clive Cussler started a search and recovery operation for the Hunley in the mid-1990s, and by the year 2000 he was successful in locating and raising the Hunley to the surface. And to this day you can go see the original Hunley submarine. It's located up in the Warren Losh Museum up in North Charleston, but this museum is only open on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. And that's because during the rest of the week they are trying to preserve and restore the Hunley in an oxygen-free tank. Now, if you didn't think you had time to make it up to the Hunley Museum, there is an exact replica of the Hunley located out in front of the still able to maintain one
Второй мировой войны.
When they finally made it safely back to port, that ship had earned the nickname the ship that would not die. And years later, the captain of that vessel wrote a book by the same title called The Ship That Would Not Die, about the exploits of the Laffey during World War II. That vessel earned a Presidential Unit Citation and 5 battle stars for its service in World War II, and it also earned an additional 2 battle stars for its service during the Korean War. Now, if you look up near the bow of the destroyer, but closer to us, you can see the submarine Clamagore. We're looking at this lengthwise. That's the SS Clamagore 343, and that was built by Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut, commissioned on June 28th of 1945, and decommissioned on June 12th of 1970. Now, that submarine did not serve during World War II. We know that submarine was on active patrol off the coast of Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It never fired any of its weapons in anger, and thank goodness for that, otherwise the Cuban Missile Crisis would have turned out a lot differently. But because they are spending a lot of money on the upkeep of the aircraft carrier and the destroyer, they are talking about possibly donating that submarine to another port in Guam. Now the star of the show over there is the aircraft carrier. That's the USS Yorktown, the CV-10, also known as the Fighting Lady. She was built by Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, and commissioned on April 15th of 1943, and decommissioned on June 27th of 1970. She's some 878 feet long, 93 feet wide, could do in excess of 30 knots. and was home to just shy of 3,000 sailors. Now, this is not the first aircraft carrier to have the name Yorktown. The first aircraft carrier to have the name Yorktown was the CV-5 Yorktown, but that was sunk during the Battle of Midway on June 7th, 1942. So halfway through construction, this vessel was renamed to the Yorktown in order to honor those sailors that fought so bravely on the original CV-5 Yorktown. Now, if you look at the main flight deck, you can see it's mostly jet aircraft they have on display up there right now. That flight deck was modernized in the mid-1950s to accommodate those jet aircraft, and that also extended the length of the vessel by about 10 feet. But you can still go and see the original propeller-driven aircraft that were used during World War II. They are just located in an hangar bay down below. Now, this vessel served almost its entire life over in the Pacific Theater of Operations, where it earned a Presidential Unit Citation and 11 battle stars for its service in World War II, and it also earned an additional 5 battle stars for its service during the Vietnam War. And this vessel was also used during the Apollo 8 mission, October 16th of 1968. It was the first manned mission to go around the moon. And when those astronauts splashed back down into the Pacific, it was the Yorktown that recovered the capsule of the astronauts and gave them a ride back. And this vessel was also in 2 movies. The best one that you would probably want to see about this is a movie called The Fighting Lady, which actually won Best Documentary in 1945. And it will give you some amazing footage of life aboard that boat, and also some amazing gun camera footage from the planes as they were attacking these islands in the Pacific during World War II. And this vessel was also used in the filming of the movie Tora, 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 which is a little more recent, 1970s. They filmed both the Japanese and U.S. aircraft carrier sequences off the Yorktown, and the way they did that is they painted parts of the ship to look like Japanese colors, they left the rest to look like U.S. colors, and that way they could film both battle sequences off the same ship. Now, guys, I can't recommend Patriots Point enough. It is really cool to go over there and check that place out. Please make sure you give yourself enough time. It's usually at least a half day, if not a full day, if you really want to see everything they have to offer over there. There are a few different ways you can get yourself over there. You can take a water taxi service, which actually only leaves about 20 yards away from our Utah harbor. You can go over there by water. Or you could drive over there. And if you drove over there, you might be going over this large bridge that's in front of us here. And this big bridge that's in front of us is the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge. And this was opened up on July 16th, 2005. And it took 3 years to build, which is 1 year ahead of schedule. And there's a reason they had to get this bridge up so quickly. And that's because prior to this, we had the Grace Memorial Bridge, which was opened up in 1929. And then we had the Silas and Pierman Bridge, which was opened up in 1966. And both of those older truss-style bridges were starting in right now, down to a patrolling depth of about 54 feet deep. That will make us 4 feet deeper than the Port of Savannah, who we are always in competition with. And it'll allow us to take those new big close Panamax vessels up here. Alrighty, guys, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring our boat up underneath the bridge here, and then I'm going to turn it sideways, and I'm going to sound the ship's horn. And I'm really just doing this for one reason, and that's because the horn makes a pretty cool echo underneath the bridge. But the horn is very loud, especially for those of you that are on the front of the boat. So if there's anyone on the front of the boat that has any hearing issues, hearing aids, sensitive ears, or just thinks they're going to be freaked out by a loud boat horn, now would be a good time to step back behind the wheelhouse where it won't be quite so loud. For any of you guys that are sitting down below in the air conditioning or the lower deck, if you want to hear this horn echo, you would need to come up to the upper deck here for a few minutes. You're not going to be able to hear this too well down on the lower deck. So I will warn you right now, and I will warn you one more time with a 3, 2, 1 countdown before I sound the ship's horn, but I will not be responsible for anyone who needs to change of underwear after I sound the ship's horn. Alright guys, here comes the horn here in 3, 2, 1. Alright, now I'd love to hang out here and do that all day, but the Coast Guard gets a little fired up if I keep sounding the horn over and over again underneath the bridge, so I'm going to kind of get us spun around in that here. Now sometimes people ask me if they look at these rock islands, and especially when we're at low tide, it looks like these rock islands are two different colors, and that's just due to a tide change. We do get we have two high tides and two low tides here every day, and the difference is we're kind of king tides here in the fall, so the tide change is almost about 7.5 feet right now. All right, so we're going to start heading over to the other side of the harbor. We are going to head over towards the Columbus Street Terminal. Once we get a little bit closer to the Columbus Street Terminal, I'm going to tell you all about what goes on over there.
Капитанская рубка.